Good day, everyone. So let's continue on our topic on muscular system. In part 1, we discussed on the general functions, structures, classification, and comparing the vertebrate muscles. So we all already compared the muscular system of the following groups such as the fishes, amphibians, and reptiles. Now in part 2, we are going to discuss the muscular system of the aves and the mammals. So muscles of the birds. In bird muscular system, most of the muscles in the body is on the breast. The largest muscle which pushes the wing down during flight is the pectoralis muscle. The pectoralis muscle also has an antagonistic muscle that brings the wing back up, and surprisingly it is not found on the back where one might expect. If it was, it would impair flight by making the bird too top-heavy. So remember that the largest muscle of the bird was the pectoralis muscle, and that's responsible for the pulling the wing downward. Next, the bird's musculature structure. Most birds have approximately 175 different muscles. The skin muscles helps the bird in its flight by adjusting the feathers. Figure-style tail muscle, the pectorals or the breast muscle, through flight, thin stinging muscles for the vertebral column. Now in flight muscles, we have here the supracoracoideus muscle. So here the supracoracoideus muscle. This kind of muscle will serve as the pulley system of the wing, because in the coracoideus muscle works using a pulley system like it lifts the wing up while the pectoralis muscle pulls the wing down. So it will give a balance action against the pectoralis muscle. So while the pectoralis muscle will act on the powerful downstroke, the supracoracoideus muscle will also give an opposite action for the wing. Leg muscles and the perching mechanism. Muscles of the lower leg are greatly reduced because large leg muscles would affect the bird's center of gravity. So imagine if the birds have a large leg muscle, this will also pulls them down and makes them heavy. So it is some sort of an adaptive mechanism for the birds that also provides them a lighter weight. So that is the reason that they have less muscle in their legs. But to cope up with that, birds have a strong tendon that automatically clamp down where the bird is perched, allowing them to sleep while they are perched. So they have a strong tendon coming from the end of femur going to the tips of the digits of their leg. So all the talons on raptors like hawks, eagles, and falcons are assisted by these tendons. So the force of the strike causes the tendons to clamp down, and that is a killing action to a prey. Now, how about the flight muscles? In birds, flight muscle can be of 3 types. So we have already discussed previously the pectoralis muscle that pulls the wing downstroke movement, and we have the coracoideus muscle that will serve as the pulley system that also pulls the wing in upward direction. So we have the pectoralis muscle, the accessory muscles, and the tensor muscles. Now the pectoral muscles may have 2 kinds. So these muscles maintain the upstroke and downstroke also. So the wings during flight called as the pectoral muscles. So we have 2 types, the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor. So these are paired muscles of large size with triangular shape. They cover the whole breast of the birds, and this is called the breast muscle. Ito yung paborito ninyo. And they are dark red in color and maintain the downstroke and forward stroke of the wings. The second one is pectoralis minor. So they are present in the dorsal side of the pectoralis major and arises from the anterior part of the sternum bone, and they control the upstroke and backward stroke besides helping the birds in quick takeoff. So this will help the bird in their takeoff during flight. Next, we have the tensor muscle. Okay, these three muscles kept the prepatagium fully stretched when the wing is extended in flight. So there are three types. We have tensor longus, tensor brevis, and tensor accessorius. So we have here the tensor longus, tensor brevis, and the tensor accessorius. Okay. So remember, this is also the pectoralis major, pectoralis minor. So those are the muscles help in bird flight. So let's proceed on the next class. We have the muscles of the mammals. Okay. The epaxial muscles, it lacks myocepta and it becomes complex. While the hypaxial muscle, the same with all tetrapods. Now we have the subvertebral group located below the transverse process and ventral reflexes the spine. So we have the anterior ribs. So this is the enlarged, penetrates external and internal obliques, and it forms the intercostal muscles and responsible or helps in ventilation of the lungs. So in between the ribs, we have the intercostal muscles. So first, we have the extra intercostal, then underneath the external intercostal muscle, we have the internal intercostal muscle. So the surface muscle on the rib part is external intercostal. Beneath that was the internal intercostal muscle. The lateral group of hypaxial muscle developed into levator scapulae, rhomboideus, and serratus. So if we going to study the human muscle system, the levator scapulae was attached to the first cervical bone of the human, first C1, then goes to the end of anterior end of the scapula. So this is the levator scapulae. So it pulls or elevates your scapula up. Then we have the rhomboideus. Rhomboideus is like a two-fold muscle in rhomboid shape. This is a paired rhomboid muscle attaching from the vertebra to the spine of the thoracic vertebra. So from the blade of the spine, posterior blades of spine sa scapula, posterior blade of the scapula to the spine of the thoracic vertebra. So that is a paired muscle. And we have the serratus. Sa human anatomy, the serratus, in order you to remember what is a serratus, this is the fan type muscle. So serratus, we have the serratus major and serratus minor. So this is the serratus muscle. Okay, next. Branchial muscle. Bronchial muscles, ancestors abductor mandibular of lower vertebrates, several muscles in animals. So, no depressor mandibular in some animals. So, we have digastric muscle, a new muscle in the mammalian group, because digastric muscle is absent among birds, reptiles, and frogs. So if you want to remember what is the digastric muscle, it is located underneath your mandible. So underneath your mandible, this is the digastric. You have a two-bellied muscle. So digastric muscle, so we have the ventral constrictor in the first and the second arch, and innervated by the fifth and seventh cranial nerves. Stapedial muscles, muscle of the larynx and constrictor of the throat. So the bronchial muscles was developed on this type of muscles: stapedial, digastric, muscle of the larynx, constrictor of the throat. So this is the muscle of the larynx. Okay, let's proceed. So to end up, so because the rest of the muscles in the body were likely similar with all mammals, and if you're going to compare it also with other forms of vertebrates, most of them also are similar and they have similar names. Now we have to compare before we end this topic on muscular system. Let's compare the axial muscles from the fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Okay. Axial muscles, we have here the epaxial or the upper muscles, hypaxial the lower. What happens to the septum, myotomes, and myosepta. And below that we have the function. Epaxial or the upper muscle. In fishes, it is a solid mass above the lateral septum. What about in amphibians? The muscle masses subdivided and rearranged into longitudinal muscles. In reptiles, masses subdivided, also rearranged like in amphibians, and longitudinal muscle. But it is absent in birds. It is missing in birds, but present in mammals. Masses subdivided also, like what happened in amphibians and reptiles. How about the hypaxial or the lower musculature of the vertebrates? In fishes, solid mass below the lateral septum. Okay. In amphibians, it happens that there are two outer oblique layers, one inner transverse layer, and the development of rectus abdominis, which is also similar with the reptiles and the birds. So the amphibians, reptiles, and birds have a similar fate, in which two outer oblique layers and one inner transverse layer with rectus abdominis. In mammals, the oblique layers are further subdivided. Okay, di ba merong external oblique and internal oblique and transverse oblique. So, the oblique layers are subdivided further. Kung sa birds, amphibians, and reptiles, two layers, it was subdivided further in higher mammals. So, separated by intercostal muscles. Okay. We have also what happened to the septum. Transverse lateral septum is present sa fishes. But later on, it was moved dorsally position in amphibians, and in reptiles, it transformed into linea alba. In mammals, I think we have also lineal alba. Myotomes is present, absent in reptiles, and nothing on birds and mammals. Myosepta present in fishes. Amphibians is present. The myosepta absent in reptiles. Birds and mammals absent. So those are in terms of function. In fishes, it produces undulating motion that propels the fish in forward motion. In amphibians, it maintains the posture, head movement, and respiration. In reptiles, it also helps in posture, head movement, and respiration, like in amphibians, and also in birds and mammals. So, from amphibians, reptiles to mammals, they have similar function. Now, what happened also in the in other groups of animals? So, in terms of branchiomeric, and hypobranchial, and what will be the function? In fishes, constrictors and levator muscle. So the branchiomeric, which could be found in jaw, or these are the jaw muscles. So what happened to the jaw muscles derived from branchiomeric? So fishes have a constrictor and levator muscle, so it helps in levating or elevates the lower mandible of jawed fishes. While in amphibians, they associate with mandibular, hyoid, and pharyngeal arches. The same thing with the reptiles, birds, and in mammals. So, from amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, the branchiomeric have similar fate. It becomes associated with mandibular bone, hyoid, and pharyngeal arches. What would be the function of the branchiomeric? Sa fishes, it is responsible for breathing and feeding. While from the amphibians to mammals, it contributes to vocalization and throat. So contributes to larynx in producing sounds, and also in throat. But in mammals, it also controls vocal functions with larynx. So aside from vocalization, it also controls the vocal functions within larynx. Now, how about the hypobranchial? So in jaw muscles, the hypobranchial. So in fishes, it is attached posteriorly to the pectoral skeleton. While in amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, it has a similar fate in which it is associated with pharyngeal arches. And the function of the hypobranchial in fishes, it serves to open the jaws and pull the gills downward and backward. While in amphibians to the mammals, it had a similar function in which it allows the movement of the larynx, hyoid, and other hyoid apparatus, and the tongue. So this is the function of the hypobranchial when from amphibians to mammals. How about the appendicular muscle? So in terms of appendicular muscles, we have the adductor, abductor, and other muscles, and followed by the function. In fishes, the adductor muscles usually found sa dorsal and that flex fins. In amphibians, it is located from amphibians to the mammals. It had a similar fate. Located ventrally and for recovery. While abductor muscles in fishes, it was located ventrally and that is for extending the fins. But in amphibians to mammals, it was there was a change in location. It becomes dorsally located for propulsive function. And other characteristics like intrinsic muscles are limited in number and undifferentiated. But when sa amphibians and reptiles, it is more, amphibians have a complex than in fish, probably increase in volume. In reptiles, it becomes more numerous and diverse than in amphibians. When it reaches to birds, intrinsic musculature is reduced, and in mammals, it's likely similar. The fate is similar with the reptiles. So in terms of function of these appendicular muscles, now in fishes, the function of appendicular muscles is more on balance and orientation. But in higher form of vertebrates, from amphibians to mammals, it is more on support and locomotion. Now, previously we discussed what is the recovery phase. So this is the forward movement of raising the limb adduction, flexing of the arm, leg, and extension of hand and foot, while the propulsive phase movement, this is the backward movement of the limb, or the extension and flexion of the hand and foot. So muscles responsible for the limb abduction and hind limb abduction. This is for the propulsive phase. Now, in amphibians, since fishes don't have the limbs, don't have the hind limb and forelimb, they are more on fins. So, let's discuss and compare in amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. So, muscles responsible for forelimb abduction and hind limb abduction. Forelimb abduction, we have the latissimus dorsi. The muscles in reptiles is also latissimus dorsi. The same thing with mammals, but with the additional one muscle called the trapezius. In hind limb abduction, amphibians, caudofemoralis. Also in reptiles and mammals, caudofemoralis. But in mammals, additional muscle, we have the biceps femoralis. Okay. And last slide, more on integumentary muscles. Okay, these are the specialized muscles. In reptiles, we have the since integument muscles presently appeared sa mga reptilian group to the higher form of vertebrates. So, amphibians and fishes don't have this structure. So, specialized muscles, in reptiles, it is called costocutaneous muscles. In birds, we have the arrector pili muscle, and at the same time, the patagial muscle. In mammals, we have the arrector pili muscle, like the birds, and patagial muscles in bats, and mimetic muscles. So, we have patagial muscles, but not in humans, but this could be found sa mga bats, ang patagial muscles. And we have the mimetic muscles. And in terms of function, it provides friction for locomotion among reptiles, and sa birds naman, it aids in flight control. In mammals, it involves in facial movement. Sa humans, it is on facial expression. But in bats, the patagial muscles were also helpful in their flight. So that's the end for the muscular system. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.